All right. So how about starting with telling us about your background?
Absolutely, yes. So I grew up in Massachusetts, not that far outside of Boston. I am a white man, growing up with that identity, sort of not really thinking about my identity much growing up. And then as I sort of became a teenager, realizing that I was, gay man at the time, really that becoming a part of my identity throughout, my teen years and as I approached college, came out as I entered my undergraduate experience. And that's sort of become a big part of my identity as a young man then. And so my identity really, as I think about my other, sort of salient aspects, my race, my ability, my gender, those are all pretty majority identities for me. But my identity as gay has really been that piece where I've faced, difference in my life or faced systemic bias. And then later on in life, I met my husband, we got married, and now I'm a gay father of two kids. And so that's another sort of identity that I hold. It's not just father, but, father of a two dad household. And it sort of reawakens or challenges some different questions for folks.
Absolutely. And I should have mentioned that while we're doing this interview is in celebration of Pride Month, and knowing that that is something that we actually have to do, right? Um, and thinking about the impact of identity on one's professional life, how have aspects of your identity as a member of the LGBTQ plus IA community impacted your career?
Yeah, I think that I'm very fortunate to have gone into a field that is very, positive towards the LGBTQ community. I've faced very little discrimination personally based on that identity, but I also recognize the fact that when in the past I had thought about changing fields or thought about, entering like would I like to go into the corporate world? Would I like to go into, I had a passion for, thinking about computer science and engineering. A lot of the thoughts about why I didn't want to leave that was how safe I felt in my current field around my identity, coming out and knowing that that would be a positive experience at work versus, not knowing in other fields always if that would be a positive experience. And so I think I'm very happy in the field I'm in, but I think there have been times in the past where I've self-discouraged myself from exploring other places based on sort of that discomfort of bringing my whole self to potentially those fields.
Absolutely. And so what does the term LGBTQIA plus hold for you? And what is the significance of Pride Month in that?
Yeah, that's a great question. I think LGBTQIA plus, it's a big umbrella, and so I think in so many aspects of my identity, I can only speak for myself, and I can only speak for myself as a gay man, right? The G of that acronym.
Mhm.
But I think what the acronym does is it gives me a shared personhood with the people who hold those identities, where I maybe can't share the experience of someone who's trans, but I am feeling, I'm part of the same battles and fights and hopes for success for those people. And so I think that it creates a broader coalition of folks who can support each other. And I think if we can find ways to sort of see others who maybe don't share identities, but for whom we share those aspects, it kind of creates that sort of broadens our sphere of empathy and broadens our sphere for whom us is. And I think that, I feel an ushood with all members of the LGBTQI plus community, that I may not feel were that not sort of a community that had been created and sort of formed together. In Pride Month specifically, I think that Pride has been really seminal for me throughout my entire life. I sort of came out to my family because of Pride. The summer after my senior year, of high school, I went to Pride and had to lie about where I had been and couldn't keep it up and had to tell my parents about that, and sort of, that was an interesting and ultimately positive experience, ultimately. And I actually, throughout college, that was really seminal for me, sort of as I grew in my leadership as a gay man and um, being leader of the LGBTQ organization at my undergraduate institution. That was sort of something I look forward to each year. And then ultimately actually met my husband at Pride in 2011. I think Pride is so many things, but it's a day where I was able to see somebody and confidently go up to them and approach them and say, "Hey, I'd like to get to know you better." Whereas that is not the experience of meeting any man on the street typically. You have to sort of be in a pretty privileged space to assume that that's going to go well. And so because it was Pride, I sort of said, hey, that's somebody who I'd like to go meet. And ultimately, 11 years later, we're married with 2 kids. So Pride's a really important part of my experience.
That's a wonderful and beautiful story. Thank you for sharing that. Yeah. And when you think about gender and you think about sexual identity, how has that empowered you to continue in the line of work? I know that you mentioned that, being in the field of academia has felt like a place that's safe
Mhm.
for your identity, but how has that empowered you?
Yeah, it's a good question. And I think, how has it empowered me? I think sort of being working with people who see you for your entire identity when that's not always your lived experience. Like, I'm not empowered when people accept my whiteness, because that's my lived experience as being accepted. But I think knowing that there are spaces that are not safe, but knowing that I have this chosen family and community of folks who are, is empowering. And so I think that sort of, that knowledge that people with the choice and every opportunity to maybe be a little bit biased are not, it's sort of this very positive feeling, when I speak with my coworkers, and sort of in the field in general, seeing the support for myself and people like me. I think different maybe than empowered, but maybe perspective taking, is that it has helped me to think differently about aspects of gender that, as a man, I can't put myself in the experience of a woman, but I know what it might feel like to feel other than, or to feel like processes and policies are not made for me. And same with being a white man, I cannot experience the world as a person of color, but I do have sort of a experience of what does it feel like to be othered, or to have systemic bias play a role, and to feel that in my own life. And so I think that's made me helped me to be more empathetic and open to those experiences, and has sort of educated me throughout my experience as a professional in that way.
Thank you. And what would you describe as your biggest success story to date in terms of your career?
Yeah, I mean, it's tough not to say, the current role that I'm in is I was in, my previous institution was in a role for the last 2 years there that was really innovative and unique, and a little bit outside the realm of career education where I had been for most of my life, my professional life. And I remember thinking, like, I like what I'm doing, but I really hope that I'm able to sort of get at the heart of the career education experience again. I hope that there's an opportunity for me to sort of, I had made a slight turn in my field. Can I get back into it? And this opportunity really is the dream job for me, and been able to create the dream team for me, and sort of the experience I have. So, taking a chance on a job where I thought, is my experience what they're looking for in this role? Taking a chance on that, honestly talking to my husband and saying, like, do you think that we can fit this size role into our lives? And that has been a success, for me, just sort of taking that chance. I think, every day we'll find out more about success. I think it's not a success in it's done, but a success in that, took the chance and succeeding.
We're super excited to have you. What are some changes that you hope to see in the workplace, in the industry, for folks who are LGBTQ IA plus?
Yeah, that's so interesting. I mean, that's such a broad umbrella that I think there are different answers for me, even different letters of that acronym, right? I think for, the trans community, I think we see a lot of, there's just, like, physical premises, things that we can do to sort of make people feel more supported based on their gender identity. And I think, again, in higher education, we're very fortunate they're very forward thinking and thinking about how do we have, gender agnostic places for, bathrooms, et cetera, or forms and paperwork and terminology, places to put, our preferred gender pronouns. I think the more that becomes, I think that a gay individual seeing gender pronouns sees the same sort of inclusion. I think there's an assumption of, well, if they're supportive of the trans community, I can look at that broadly. And so I think the more markers there are as well, um, you know, LGBTQIA identity oftentimes, or sometimes, is a identity that you have to disclose over and over and over again. And so I think that when you're talking with somebody, you can't assume that once I think if I was a person of color, people would probably know that going into a conversation, or know that coming into a room. But I don't know how things are going to change when I disclose that identity. And I think the more ways that people can have to show their support prior to that, whether that be on teams having a he him, or just again the way that the institution supports that community. I think that that's really important. One of the biggest ways for I think in terms of my own experience as a gay father is that I think, and many places are doing this well, but just looking at parental leave versus maternity and paternity leave, I think that there are, not to go too far into it, there are very medical reasons why maternity leave is often a different experience, but that's a medical necessity and very important. And then there's bonding with a new child and acclimating your life to bringing a child into the world, whether it be through adoption or surrogacy or birth. And I think that that is everyone's responsibility in a family. I think it's both a gender equality issue to think about how do fathers leave their workplace to take care of a new child in the family as much as mothers and all parents. So I think that that's sort of a next step that a lot of companies are taking.
Thank you. And reflecting on your career so far, can you tell us who or what has been the most helpful in building success?
Yeah, I will say, I think having close friends in my, friends who have similar roles to me, maybe don't work directly with me, but friends who I know enough about my work, know enough about the place where I'm at, friends at the same organization who I can share those candid conversations and hopes and fears and dreams with, have been the most helpful to me, because I think that everybody carries a little bit of self-doubt with them, and to be able to check that with a friend who treats you as another. I think if we treated ourselves the way that we treat our friends, we'd be much better people. But your friends,
Yeah.
your workplace friends are there to say, like, no, you actually have this and this experience and this skill. And so I think building out those relationships at work is so important. And those are the people, when I look back, who has sort of carried me throughout my career through the positive and negative times, are those, I think that there's mentorship, and then there's sort of that camaraderie, and that camaraderie piece has been really important for me.
Oh, wow, that's really great. And I'm actually glad that you actually made the distinction, because now I want to talk about mentorship, and how what we've been doing to build up our mentorship, that not really build up, but like take it to the next level, because we have a great program already. But in your opinion, what role does mentorship play in success, in professional success, and how have you gone to find, what steps have you taken to find effective mentors?
Yeah. You can't understate the importance of mentorship in professional success. I think mentors are the people who, and there's different types of mentorship, but oftentimes the people who have been down the road you're about to go down, and can point out those potholes to you beforehand, or who know you well enough to see an experience or to see an opportunity to grow and learn, and to be able to encourage you to take that chance and that risk. And again, I think it's different from sort of that peer sometimes, where they can sort of have both the authority, the experience, and sort of your best interests at heart. They see it as sort of part of their role to mentor you. I think mentorship, there's mentorship, where somebody is assigned as a mentor. Oftentimes you start a new job, you get assigned a mentor, and that can be really important. But I think sometimes the best mentors are the ones that you find, the ones that sort of come into your life in a non-structured way. Oftentimes what I have found is that I've had mentors and I hadn't realized it till I reflected on it. And then once I found those mentors, I could label it and then get so much more out of that relationship. So thinking back to previous jobs where I said, I really wish I had a mentor. And then I took stock and said, I hadn't realized that I did have this mentor in my life. It wasn't my supervisor, oftentimes isn't, but there's other person who I could confide in and who knew me really well. Once I put that label out there and started having really candid conversations with that person around being a mentor for me, again, really putting it out there, that relationship was so much more powerful and impactful because we both knew what we were looking to get out of it. And so I think that, sometimes it's assessing who do you know now. Maybe you have a mentor and haven't really realized it because it's sort of part of your experience already. And if not, keep looking. I think that people really like to be mentors. I think there's a lot of, how to be a good mentor is a really important thing to learn throughout your career.
Sure.
So I think that, any fear that you have about asking someone to take on that role, oftentimes is, well, what if they say no, or what if they don't want to? And the thing is, they probably do want to. And so just taking that chance.
Yeah. I love the fact that you mentioned, like, mentors learning how to be good mentors, because I think we spend a lot of time teaching students how to be good mentees.
Mhm.
And for mentors to take the time to also learn how to be better mentors, how to be good mentors, I think is also just a critical part of the conversation.
Definitely. They're both active roles. You can't passively be a mentee or a mentor. And I think that's oftentimes the trap, not that trap, but how those relationships sort of don't come to full fruition. So yeah.
All right. And talking about mentorship, one of the things that you talked about is like, how they help you sort of like process things and take things to the next level. But looking at it from the perspective of social capital,
Mhm.
how would you describe social capital and how has it influenced your career and success?
Yeah, I think social capital has very positively influenced my career and success. Like I said, I think, being in higher ed and also having the experience of having a marginalized identity has helped me sort of be a little bit more open to exploring my majority identities. And I think that being a man and being white and being, middle class growing up socioeconomically, being in the Northeast, there are lots of things that have sort of put me in the places I needed to be successful in a lot of ways. And part of that was knowing certain folks or having the ability to have certain experiences, where I was able to be successful in both my schooling, or initially having the experiences where I was able to get leadership, where I was able to take jobs if I needed to, but not because if I wanted to, but not because I needed to outside of school, and really focus on my academics. So I think there's all sorts of ways that the social sphere that I grew up in and that I'm part of has benefited me to be where I'm at today. In terms of social capital, the connections and people that I have, I think that, again, it's difficult to say directly sort of the people who were part of my life prior to entering college. But once I did enter this field, I think that, that was the benefit that I got, was I very easily sort of entered into my educational world. Once in that way, in that field, I think I have built a social capital within higher education and within the career education space that's been incredibly, immensely beneficial to me. Whether that, again, be through comradely friends or peers or mentors. But I think there's no understating sort of the way that people's identities impact their social capital. I think that there are ways that I have more social connections with, people who I've met through LGBTQ organizations in Boston or gay father organizations, where I have that cachet of people who I can lean on. So that's sort of a benefit of that social capital. But it's a difficult thing to analyze your own. I will say that, to analyze your own social capital in a really objective way. So
Absolutely. Well, can you share with us one challenge or setback that you've experienced in your career and how you overcame it and how it made you better?
yeah, I think so many. I think everybody, there's so many times where if I had a time machine, right? But I think, one of them, I think when I had my first child, when I had my daughter the first time, there were lots of things where, again, the institution where I worked was incredibly supportive in policy and in practice, but there were lots of missteps and miscommunications around a father leaving when a child was being born, and who's going to take on that responsibility, and, well, you'll really be here, right? And I'm like, no, I won't. And sort of, I think that there was a whole sort of professional loss of status that I had or perceived, in taking that time away from work to be with my daughter. And then a second time around again, when my son was born 3 years later, that was no one person or one policy's fault, but that I think all these things are sort of set up to say, well, yes, of course, women are not going to move up as quick, like all the other associated pieces, like, we're expected to, women to take time out of work to sort of think about their family, and also there's implications for that. But men, you're going to keep your last name, right? And you're just going to come back in a couple of weeks, right? And I did keep my last name, but I was out. I took a full email off, nose to the grindstone parental leave, and I think that there were, again, not any malicious or intentional, but there were repercussions for that for me. And I think that was a setback that took me a little while to sort of build back that credibility and capital, in those roles that I had.
Thank you for sharing. Sometimes I think if you haven't gone through an experience, you don't know exactly what it is like for people who have had to go through those experiences. So I appreciate you sharing that. My last question for you is if you could give one piece of advice to your younger self, what would it be?
Yeah. That's and again, if I had a time machine, right, that'd be amazing. I think, I'd say to myself, if it doesn't look right, it's not over yet. I think that there are so many times you'd be like, this didn't succeed. And you have to always say, comma, yet. And I think the times in my life that I sort of said I hit a brick wall, or I wasn't sort of in the place where I wanted to be in my career or my life in general. I look back on those sort of fondly and with humor now because I'm in, it's a different place. But I could go back and say, like, enjoy all of the times, even if it feels like you're not where you should be, because you're always kind of where you should be. And I'm not of the belief of, everything happens for a reason and that it'll all work out. I think you have to work at it, but I think sort of believing in yourself of where you are, during those various parts that seem really difficult, knowing that it's not difficult because it's over. It's difficult because you're still working through something. And to have that optimism through those times would have been helpful to sort of know that in the back of my mind, like this will work out. Is always one of those things that you like to know in the back of your mind. So.
All right. Well, I want to thank you so much for not only sharing this part of your identity with us, but we're also grateful to have a leader who allows us to bring ourselves to work and talk about the challenges involved in that and what that means for us as a career center, as a place where we want our students to feel represented and welcome, regardless of salient or other identities that may not be as pronounced in their career development. So thank you.
Thank you.